In Numbers chapter 9, we have a lengthy paragraph describing how when the Israelites were rescued out of slavery in Egypt, God's presence was going with them, and it was symbolized by this pillar of cloud in the daytime and the pillar of fire at nighttime. And that every time the pillar of cloud and fire would move, they would pack up their camp and they would follow. Wherever it would stop, that's where they would stop. If it stayed there a month, they would stay there a month. If it stayed there a day, they'd stay there a day. If it stayed a full year, it says, they stayed a full year. But whatever the pillar of cloud and fire did, that dictated when it was time for them to get up and move. They were led by the presence of God. There's so many different applications of that. Obviously, it was like Moses wasn't leading them. Policies and protocols weren't leading them. A democratic voting process wasn't leading them. Bylaws and institutions were not leading them. God's Spirit was leading them. God's presence was the point. God has always been about heart connection. God has always been about His Spirit and our spirit having communion and union. He has always been focused on love from the inmost place. And everything else that He's cultivated in history has been about supporting the health of that union. The presence of the Lord comes upon you for a set of tasks that He is energizing you for, because that is what He's called you to in that season. And sometimes He asks you to pick something up for a week, sometimes just a day, and sometimes for a whole year, and sometimes longer. Some of us would continue to our own hurt to try to serve after the season has ended in those ways. This feels really fresh to me because there's a thing that I've been doing because the Holy Spirit led me to do it, and now I'm sensing that as I consider preparing for it and planning for it and working on it, instead of feeling like, oh man, this is wonderful, I'm starting to feel clogged in my spirit and like I need to back off of that and make space for some other things that the Lord is doing both in me and in those around me. Don't just keep plugging away forever when the grace has lifted because you think, well, this is what we agreed to do. The programs, the disciplines, the systems we build are all meant to cultivate a heart connection to the Father so that we can be responsive to who He really is moment by moment. A jazz musician is not a classical musician. A classical musician will carefully read the sheet music, even memorize the sheet music, and then when they show up at the concert, they play the sheet music verbatim. There's no improvisation in that sort of environment, but jazz musicians will understand and memorize the scales and the chords and the notes that make up. They will practice and practice and practice and practice, but when they're in the moment, there's large space for improvisation, and the reason they can improvise with integrity is because they have prepared with diligence. You can only improvise with integrity, claiming to be led by the Spirit, if you have prepared with diligence and discipline, being a person of prayer, being a person of the Word, being a person of obedience to Jesus in the main and plain. The Spirit who wrote the book is not going to contradict it in your life. It takes some skill and it takes some practice and it takes some walking a while with Jesus to begin to recognize when the pillar of a cloud and fire is lifting and moving on and it's time to move, and when He's camped and you dare not move. Some stuff to think about. Have a good day.